All right, everybody, welcome back. So, usually, before we get the show started, you're going to hear a nice little introduction about our guests, and I've kind of gotten away from that the last couple episodes because number one, you read that in the show topic as it comes up in your browser when you're about to hit play on the show. So, I don't want to be redundant and everything, and more than that, like I think that also starts. I'm feeling that it takes away from our guests, such as Shirin, to be able to be sharing their side of the story without us already having a bias from the info that we hear in my intro. And I feel it takes away and does a disservice sometimes. So, first of all, Shireen, welcome to hanging out
Thank
with us
you.
today.
I so appreciate you pronouncing my name correctly.
That's part of our cultural shared similarities of having multiple friends in multiple communities, and it's very much a yeah, I'm in Florida, so I'm the gringo here, and people like when I actually say things with a even with a Latin or Spanish accent, it's like, oh, yeah, it's, public school. So I'm glad that we were able to start off with that, and and also I'm just loving that one. We know, I'm sure you're familiar with what your name actually means,
Yeah, I
and
am.
yeah, are you? I'm assuming.
I am. Some exes have called me bittersweet, but I believe that I am pretty sweet.
Yeah, and also it's a sheer is a song, this beautiful song, right? It's so, and what you're trying to do is help people bring out the beautiful songs of their own life with empowerment and the freedom to be them, which takes a lot of effort and a lot of insight and a lot of patience. And you have a really cool story and a really cool journey. So before we get into what you're doing now, I don't want to ruin it and give away all the good stuff, but I think it's also important for people to understand what makes you so impactful and what you're trying to do and help other people with that's so impactful from your story about how you got there in the first place.
I appreciate that. Like any other person within our society, at least Western society, modern society, spend many, many years striving for all those things that we believe we need to achieve. And I thought I was winning in life. And a life event in 2013 turned that all around. I separated from my then partner of 13 years, and we had two kids together. And this was toward the end of 2013. And it completely broke me. And and I didn't understand why it broke me because I had had heartbreak before. And yeah, I've read that breakups aren't so much just about a broken heart, but about a broken future, because that's the future that you have imagined and planned for and such. And there was certainly that, but it became a straw that broke the camel's back, or the tipping point for me, however way you look at it. But it made me realize that the worldly gains I had were not enough. Like it was like I had built this beautiful external life that everybody oohed and awed about. And internally, I don't want to say dead, though I do have the last few years leading up to 2013. I do call them my walking dead years. But it's this feeling of mutedness.
Mm.
It's like muted internally and on, crack externally. I
Yeah.
don't know what else to call it, but it's this, like being so fully in whatever you want to call it, that treadmill or rat race, that it wasn't even aware of the fact that I was so unhappy. Because I was living the life that everyone said I should live, and it was fine. I mean, it was a cushy bubble. I wasn't down and out. I didn't have an addiction. None of that stuff. But I was really, really muted. And I've come to realize that I think that a great number of people aren't facing, I mean, you hear those people who hit rock bottom, you hear about those people who go through, you know, tragic events, and some persevere and all of that, and that's really great. But I think that there's a large population of people who are just really doing their best according to what they have learned,
Yeah.
and feel like they're going through the motions of it. And then suddenly you've lost a few decades and like, what the F am I doing? What am I doing?
Yeah.
So I had that big aha moment. Well, it didn't feel like an aha moment. It felt like crap in at the end of 2013. And I was like, I just like, this can't be my life. And I really wanted to find the truth for myself. Like nothing was worth it. The only thing that really held me up was my kids. Like,
Mm,
okay, them, I know that I have to right my ship for them.
right.
And so I went through 6 very challenging years, in that, I mean, challenging in that I challenged myself. Like, what's in this nook and cranny? What's in this corner? What have I not looked at? And I did many workshops, read so many books, watched every video there was to watch, sat with Buddhist monks, right? Like I did it all, and it was really, really difficult and challenging, and turned everything around.
Yeah.
And after 6 years, I really felt like I was whole. I remember actually leaving this one specific workshop, and it was 2019, at the beginning of 2019, and I was like, oh. And I
Yeah.
realized at that time two things. One, that if I don't, I mean, I wanted to be married, I wanted to be with someone, but I knew that if I was not, that I would be totally fine. And I also knew that if I died that day, I didn't want to, but I knew that I had lived a full life. Like, it felt
Mhm. There was a
really
com there was
satisfying.
yeah, there was that completion of that. And I just wanna paint a bigger picture for people who haven't yet delved into reading your bio, and this is kind of why I wanna try something a little bit different with you, is, like you said, things were going really well, you were successful, there was no negative, right? There was no addictions, there was none of these crazy things. Paint a picture of what all of that success looked like for people who have no clue, who haven't Googled you yet. What was going on in your world? What were you doing? Where,
Well,
where who were you hanging out with? All those things, right? And I really want them to see like what you're describing
yeah.
is whether someone is destitute, or someone is hanging out with high rollers and being a high roller, whatever, right? And that whole spectrum in between, we still have the work to do. We still have to do the unpackaging. We still have to peel away the layers. We still have to have growth and self-awareness and authenticity and accountability. So, but like you said, there was all these wonderful things going on and going right in your life. So just paint a picture of what that was professionally, and for everybody who's
Yeah, so I'm a media executive, and my background is in film. I actually produced the very first feature film that was ever streamed online. It premiered online. It's called Walls of Sand, if you care to watch. It was back in '96, and the technology wasn't quite there. So it kind of looked like a slideshow. But my background is in film and broadcasting. I ran quite a few series for the Discovery Network and Scripps Network, and a lot of specials for the likes of ABC and BBC and Channel 4. And so very much in that world. And then in 2008, I switched over to the agency world just because there was a lot of opportunity there, and the online world. Yeah, a lot of hobnobbing, a lot of award shows, a lot of hanging out with celebrities, which I won't rabbit hole, but I had amazing, I mean, like, at the various Emmy and Oscar parties, and which is all really fun. And whatever, the homes, the cars, the awards, the accolades. Again, I just like, I mean, I remember at the time, I mean, this is leading to the breakup. We had this gorgeous home in Sonoma, and people would come there and be oohing and awing. It was sort of like this Tuscan villa, and I remember it was like, I was like, I remember at the time I was like The Shining, where there was the gorgeous resort, and Jack Nicholson's character was like losing his mind. That's how I was. I was like, wow, you guys have no idea what's going on in here. Like, it's just
Right. And that's the picture I wanted to paint it, because you had this American dream. You have like what people say they want and what people say they're working for. And they have this relationship and family and homes and success and impact.
correct.
And this space inside of us is, and I know like we were talking a little bit before we started the conversation, before we started recording, was just this like cultural community intergenerational pressures that we play out, that we don't even realize is not getting us to where we want to go. And in your situation, it sounds like you had this big thing, right? This very big thing that just tore that fabric. Some people have less intense experiences that brings them to that, but in your situation, it was a very intense experience for that became an eye opener to do something different versus repeating the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and it's sort of, I suppose, the law of, something in motion will stay in motion unless hit with
Right.
a
Unless you hit the
external,
wall on it. Yeah.
and I feel like I and I think that there is a lot less growth when one of life's many paradoxes, like when life is at its cushiest, we tend to have the least amount of growth because there is nothing, we don't really feel like we need to strive for anything. So
Yep.
again, externally, I thought, I'm fine. So why? And everybody looking in, it'd be different if I was just like down and out, or I was hitting the bottle or something. And people are like, you need help, But I didn't have any of that. I
Mm.
was super organized. I was productive. I made a good living. I mean, even the community and the friends and all of that. It's just that internal fire was completely extinguished, and I
Mm.
wasn't even aware of it. And that the tricky thing is that I was also doing work that I love. I mean, I still love doing that. I'm still executive producer on a bunch of different projects because I love the creativity
Yeah.
and the entertainment industry, and especially the type of projects I'm working on now. Um, so it wasn't even that. I mean, and I think that's important to point out because people, look at their life, oh, I'm fine, and maybe they are. But I think that if anyone listening or watching feels that there is something missing, that there's a muting of something within them that's just not showing up or being allowed to show up, there's work to do. That is it.
Yeah. Agreed. I had a conversation before we jumped on this. I had my last session for the morning with one of my clients, and I was talking to them about the awareness of they're really good, and the people they're attracting are really good at the attraction to beginner dating phase and and that first stage of being in a relationship that we can call maybe the first 90 days. And then what happens after that? They're really good at that stage, and they're really good at attracting people in that stage. who are good in that level, from the other side, that the person's also good at it. But then once they're in the relationship to commitment, relationship to, is this the person I want to be with over a long period of time? That's the stage where I find a lot of people are just not good at. And we're so used to, with all the amount of dating, and right, everybody's going on hundreds and hundreds of dates, or even with job interviews, like people are really, really good at doing job interviews, and they're really good at the first few weeks of work. But then what happens when it becomes monotonous and boring, and you don't have someone investing in you, and you don't have a team leader or a boss like guiding you anymore, and you're not right? And I think a lot, this idea of accountability and ownership of, like what you were saying, is if you're feeling something, it's like what is it, like on the subways in New York? If you see something, say something.
Mhm.
But we're,
Absolutely.
right, but we're not. But we're usually putting it to blame outside of us, versus like the word that, when you're talking about muting, I've been playing with the word malaise a lot. Like you just can't put your finger on it, but something is wrong, and you don't feel awful, and you're not necessarily clinically depressed, but just something feels missing. And right, and it is that muted sound. Like there's a part of you that's like diminished. You're not bright. You're not, like feeling like your energy is going out into the world. And I think that that's like pre this pandemic. I think that's been like, there's a few emotional pandemics that I think have been going on in the world. One is codependence, of being in codependent relationships, but two, is that what you're describing? I think you put your finger on that very clearly. I think that's been going on in the world for a while now. And you really are describing what I think majority of people don't even realize is what's happening.
Well, and there's actually research behind this, in that, they say that as children, somewhere between age 0 and 7, we either detach or disassociate depending on the degree of the severity of what happened with our true essence.
Mm.
So detachment could be like, you're in your crib and you cry and your parents don't come soon enough, and you're like, oh well, what I need, what I naturally need doesn't work. So you create some sort of, even as a baby or as a toddler, some sort of strategy for something different.
Sure.
So you don't trust what is within you because it hasn't been effective. That would be like detachment. And disassociation. There's a variety of a spectrum of disassociation, and it could be, somebody's in a very toxic environment as a kid, and it's like, that's not safe, so I am going to protect myself. So what happens at that time, we end up starting to take our cues from the outer world rather than trusting our
Yeah.
inner essence.
Yeah.
And then things get reinforced that way, because when we go to school, and I mean, I can talk all day long. I don't know if you watched the Sir Ken Robinson's famous TED talk, but he talks about how our education system is broken. And really, it's broken because we don't teach our children the most fundamental um, conversations within life. We teach them so much academic intelligence and very little emotional intelligence. So we grow up not even believing that that is a priority. And that's changing now. I mean, you look at the Northern European
Mhm.
countries, and they are very much baking that in. And yeah, I mean, I can go on and on about our
Well,
education.
I have this, for those who are listening, not watching. I have this huge grin on my face as Shirin was saying that. It's because one of the conversations I had this morning was with one of my clients, who they come from a culture where performance and achievement is priority. And I asked them, so tell me more about you being praised for being a kind soul.
Love that.
And when were you, when are you getting that now in this present day relationship? And were you getting that from your family of origin, where you were praised for just being a kind and gracious, loving person, versus what can you do for somebody else, and how can you achieve, and then how can they benefit from your achievement, which is very cultural in some ways. And Right. That's exactly what we're not getting. And, now, and especially when we're in a culture where, knowing your feeling, F your feelings, your feelings don't matter. And creativity. And I love that the fact that there are education systems that are now, especially preschools, but it's funny, it's always preschools and maybe some elementary schools, Montessori or Emilio Reggio or those type of that are inspired with like bringing that out in the children. But there's none, I don't know, like, I don't know, I'm not seeing Montessori high schools or Emilio Reggio high schools or these, like, I mean, you may have these creative arts based schools, like, for music and whatever, but it's still performance based and skill based and mastery, as opposed to, like you said, this emotional intelligence as well. And you usually have the more artsy type of people who are going to be off the beaten path personality wise anyway.
But it is also, though, I should say, and it is also those students who graduate who create the corporations and companies that we work for. Like, you talk about things being systematic. I mean, it's we create, and you're absolutely right. The artists are the only exception in this. I mean, and true artists, and I know that we don't make it easy for them. We
Right.
don't reward the artists the way we do somebody, creating a startup or whatever it is. So, and then when you haven't been raised with that, how are you able to incorporate that into a company culture? Or, so it's generational, it's educational, and again, we don't even think about it until somebody comes along. I so often think about like the Me Too movement or Black Lives Matter, and frankly the pandemic. Like, those are things that en masse suddenly shift our perception. Like, I was in the entertainment industry. I wasn't necessarily on the casting couch, but I did have,
Yeah.
kind of inappropriate dinners with executive producers who just wanted, let's talk over dinner about this.
Right.
And like, there
The
was
fallacy of that, of even in the right, even the 90s, 2000s. I remember hearing from someone who I met in 1996 who grew up there, and they were in high school and they started working in LA and in the entertainment industry. And they told me some stories. So we're talking about like the mid to late 80s.
Mhm.
And that it
it's
just
how
was.
it's how it is. Like, you're gonna take down Harvey Weinstein.
Right.
You're gonna
Right.
take down, like, that is impossible, but it is possible. And up until the time that happened, like, it wasn't in my brain. It was like, you have to play the game, and this is how it is,
Hmm.
and, just blah blah blah. But no. So
Yeah.
paradigm shift. And Black Lives Matter, paradigm shift.
Right.
Pandemic, oh, like, we could actually work from home and still really function and even thrive as a society.
Correct. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know
Yeah. And I think that's the whole basis of, like, when people have conversations. I've a good friend of mine, and it's a contrasting story. I have a good friend of mine who we haven't seen each other often, as we did before the pandemic. And I reached out to him the other day. I was at a concert where I saw he's very much into country music, and we have very different political, very different political agendas. But we always focus, like, our friendship and our respect for each other always came first. And I remember, like, when I met him the other day, we just sat down and, like, just, it was great. And it was just so nice. Like, and even though he was presenting some things, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. It wasn't like there was no going for the jugular, even though we're diametrically opposed on certain things, but it was just like the human decency factor was there. And I remember I was out at an event a few weeks ago contrasting this, and I was talking to a young couple that just got engaged. And I knew that we had different political beliefs. And I said to him, I'm very much looking forward to getting to know, even and getting to know you. And even if we disagree, I still look forward to liking you at the end of the conversation. And he's like, oh, that's really nice. And he, like, pulled his fiance into the conversation. She's like, yeah, that's not going to be my agenda. Like, you're willingly starting off with that. I disagree with you on politics, that you're going to want to, that you're willingly telling me you already hate me. Like, and there's just these like different like embracings of like creating different and other, forget whether even it's work or relationships, like even like I see it with relationships. And I know one of the things that you were talking about with all the different ways that your book can show up is how do you navigate this even in relationships, is not seeing, talking about the emotional intelligence, not seeing the value of which we can have relative influence on each other in a positive way versus trying to force it down each other's throats.
That's the thing. And I think that, we as humans live life as if our opinion is the way it is. I mean, I have my political views. I have, but that it doesn't, that's just, I think that is a part of being human. It's our ability to put our, and it sounds cliche, putting our differences aside, but not even just putting our differences aside, shifting that conversation
Yeah.
to what it means to be human and how we came to our various opinions. And if there is a way for us to meet in the middle. So like me and my in-laws also have very different political views, and we just made the decision that we will not have those conversations when we have family gatherings because we are together as a family and as humans. And it's not that we are ignoring politics or not politically aware or whatever, but we are actively choosing to come to the table as humans and connect
Yeah.
that way. And that is what I want
That's
because
so
I
much more
think that,
powerful.
well, when you do the work of self-transformation, there is a accountability that is baked in that you can't escape. Like there is no way that you can do self-transformation the way that it becomes a wake-up call for yourself and not feel a sense of responsibility, whether it is, community-wide or global. Like for me, what happens in Uganda is important to me. It isn't, oh, it's happening over there. It's the world
Yeah.
is my community and is incredibly
Mm.
important. Some things I can affect, some things I can't.
But you're also
But
saying you should be aware of what's going on out there so you can have any level of impact on a local that can trickle down to world.
whether it and it's a level of empathy and compassion as a human. So it is the opposite of the othering that you're talking about.
Mm.
And I had this whole conversation during gay pride. It's, and I don't want to rabbit hole down that way, but like the whole, like it used to be LGBT and now it's LGBTQIA and then it's LGBTQIA2 plus, and they're just adding to it. And again, while I stand shoulder to shoulder with all the other letters within the group, there is a danger in bucketing anything that is outside of straight into the other category.
Right.
Like this is the normal, and then there's the other. And yes, and it used to be that we were tolerated, and now we're accepted.
Right. And even within that community of the subdivisions of tolerate and not tolerating within that
Oh my
subcommunity.
God,
Right.
yeah.
Like
I
each of the
mean,
subcommunities. Yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, I see. Well, it's in everything, right? I mean, you can break that down and even apply it and even into like
Absolutely.
the performing arts world, right? Or I see it with my I see it with my military clients, like how they'll always rag on like different parts of like, the like, oh, well, we're a Marine and you're just like Coast Guard. Oh, that's not really armed services, right?
Or even, I mean, I'm Iranian, and I
Mm-hmm.
would say yes, I definitely person of color, and there's actually Iranians that don't even consider themselves people of color,
Sure.
but there are definitely more privileged minorities than others. So you can't say that, like again, like a trans woman will not have the same privileges as a straight white gay guy. I mean, that's
Right.
just
Right.
how it is.
It's
We're
nuance.
clumped in.
It's
We're
all
just,
nuance
right.
for sure.
So yes, coming back, dialing it all back to human conversations, like the very essential conversation, like what does your soul want at this time? What is it reaching out for? That's what I'm interested in.
It's so hard, right? It's so challenging because as a therapist, as someone who works with entrepreneurs, as someone who works with performing artists, it's so interesting that we're one when ego gets in there, then we're distracted,
That's
and
all it is. That's
that's all it
all
is, right?
we're having. My ego versus your ego.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
right. No, you're right. Yeah.
And when I and just to tie that into that story with that couple, when I was talking to the guy, I said, "Can we start the conversation with all the things that we do agree on?" And that's like that opened that door, right? The fiance wasn't part of that conversation. I was really trying because I kind of knew who wore the pants in that relationship. Like it was kind of obvious just by their energy of the two of them. Um, and and I set that intention there. And it was just so not received that there was just this blatant, like, I'm not going to connect with you. I don't want to connect with you. I don't want to connect with, and that can happen on both extreme, political parties. And I think both sides are really stupid. And I'm going to call them out on that for doing that and being the wall of like, well, right. That's just not healthy. And that's not like, and I see this with my clients, and I'm challenging with one of my clients, former military. And I'm like, listen, you and I, we know that we disagree on so many things, but I'm only here to help you get things that make you feel healthier, make you feel happier, and and more importantly, make you feel more connected with more things and more people. So if it does the opposite of that, if a belief does opposite of that, if an experience does opposite, if it doesn't allow you to connect more to yourself and more to others, then it's probably not a healthy thing. And I would say
Great.
that to someone on the other side of the political coin too. So there has to be some baseline of, like you're saying, that your soul figuring that out. So like what would be like, where would you start with someone just to help them identify that? And obviously, but that's going to tie into your book, into your courses, obviously. And I don't want to give away too much that, people, I want to leave a little bit of something to the imagination, but what would you kind of like, just kind of jab them with to say, like, what, here's the first question I would maybe leave you with, and have you start contemplating if this is really, if you're feeling muted, if you're feeling this malaise, this numbness, you're not getting that which you say you want.
Mhm.
Look here.
Well, it's a tricky one because the very first chapter and week of my book and the process is mind detox, and I started there because that's the biggest culprit. You talk about the ego. That is it. Our mind is so closely attached to our ego. It is the place that is attached. It's not our heart, it's certainly not our soul, it's not our body, it's our mind that is very, very coupled with our ego. And
Mm-hmm.
the more threatened we are, the more protective we feel, the stronger our egos.
Yeah.
So we can either, and this is interesting, and I know you'll agree with me, just because you are a practicing therapist. The mental health had the same stigma that spiritual health has now. Like 10 years ago, you'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna go see my therapist, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't like, hey world, I'm going to take a mental health break now. And
Right.
for everybody to be like,
And let everybody know. And people are cheering you on for that. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So spiritual health, I believe, it has that same stigma right now, you know?
Mm.
And so in order for us to do the type of work that I recommend and suggest in the book, we truly have to get out of our own way. And
Oy.
the only way that we can do that, well, there's two. The two main things that I talk about in that week, and I won't elaborate, but one is not believing everything we think. So when people talk about awareness or consciousness, it's literally stepping outside of our thoughts. And there are ways to do it. Meditation is one of them, but not everybody is a meditator. So I talk about various other ways of doing it. And then the other part is to limit or curate the content that we consume, because we're so bombarded with everything. And I don't know if you saw The Social Dilemma, but the documentary
Mhm.
about how the creators of social media
Yeah.
never intended to create the Frankenstein that is created.
Yeah.
And you can't really even point your finger anywhere, because in order for the companies to succeed, they need advertising dollars. And the ones that have the biggest advertising dollars are the corporations. And the corporations have strong political tie-ins,
Sure.
right? So, and what the social platforms are doing what they've been programmed to do, which is to feed people more of what they believe the people want. So we're all in these echo chambers,
Right.
right? And so either it's the echo chamber, or we turn on the TV, and especially the news, it is created. I mean, I've been on that side
Sure.
where you are, like, it's formulated so that it becomes provocative. And like, these things are so measured. We're going to bring this in at our, 203. We're going
Yep.
to drop this in at 207. I mean, I've done the programming. I
Right.
know.
Right.
So and so
So crazy.
so
Right.
to
It's the but it's literally programmed. I mean, like in other words, it's programming us. uh, the best thing I was at Dave Matthews Band concert last week, and like the 5, 6, 7 songs were just like it kept building and building and building, and he was like, right, I played a fast song and it was great, well-known song, and then he just went to something that was just like super slow, and it was a new song, and all of a sudden you see, like, and this is Dave Matthews, there's 20 something thousand, 30,000 people there, and I'm like, it's bathroom time, and I'm going to the bathroom, and like I see like it's emptying out, and I'm like, oh my god, like what a lost opportunity, because I can't imagine like the average person. I mean, this is like the one thing I would say about like a Dave Matthews show is like I've been to a few and it's that same rhythm. Like I don't know if Taylor Swift is doing that. I don't know if that's like, oh, I need to do my new song and I have a new album that just came out, like, so therefore I need to put this in. But it was like being mindful of that energetic flow. But like that's like what you're saying, like social media and news and like these things are baked in to the programming neurologically and physiologically to get that compelling hook. Which I think on the other side, when you just referenced a TED Talk a few minutes ago, I think that's what's so brilliant about TED Talks. There's a formula to TED Talks.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
and there's a great video. I can't remember the name of the gentleman who did this. He basically gave a TED talk where it was him basically doing what the magic of the TED talk was. He's like, and now I'm gesticulating wildly into the crowd with my pair of glasses that I'm wearing that don't even have lenses, that makes me look smarter, and I'm going to put my glasses in my hands, I'm going to bite the tip of my glasses, and now I'm going to wave it in the air as if I'm really punctuating the point. Yada, right? It was a brilliant TED talk.
Yep. Oh my God, I have to watch it. I
And
haven't seen
now
it.
I'm going to raise my voice like I'm getting to the crescendo about you should be taking something away, and there's something wrong with you if you don't get my point.
It's awesome.
It was the TED Talk about TED Talks, right?
Yep.
But I think that's what you're sharing is like that's what we're being programmed to do culturally and societally at some level without even realizing it.
It's truly quieting the mind. I mean, it blows me away how we are so afraid of our minds being quieted, being able to truly sit in silence. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like as soon as we finish work, we'll, turn on a TV
Right.
show. We'll
That
go on
transition to
social
something
media.
else.
Like
Yeah.
it's just na 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 na. And then we're all wondering, like, why do we feel so overwhelmed and, underwhelmed and all of that? I mean, it
Right.
is, and I talk about it in the book. There's a thing called infoxication. It's
Huh.
literally content overload. So you can't make really clear decisions.
Sure.
It's kind of like, a state of limbo almost.
Sure. And we're going to
Because
go for the things that are the least resistance or that we're most, consistently habitually doing. It's funny while you were talking about that, like obviously, I don't want to distract people from the work that your book is doing, but I'm thinking of two books that I think are really powerful to get more information to kind of support what you're accomplishing for people. One is The Untethered Soul, which sounds a lot like what you're
I
right.
love Michael
There you
Singer.
go. So there you go.
I have to little story about him.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What's the
So,
other one?
and the other one is all the work that Stephen Porges is doing with the polyvagal theory about
Mm,
the interoception and right the internal and external stimuli where our nervous system is just so flooded, and that how like what you're describing of cultural phenomena, social media, TV, movies, right, all these things, our nervous system is already so emotionally dysregulated that it knows how to take advantage, right? That these things are built to capitalize on our emotional dysregulation, and especially now with the political uh, conflicts, for lack of a better word, shit show. Let's just call it that. That it's capitalizing on our
yes.
dysregulation.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting that you talk about Michael Singer because and I love him for many reasons. But when he wrote The Untethered Soul, he was going through the biggest litigation of his life. And most people
Oh,
don't know that.
wow.
His background, much like mine, isn't in, he's not a doctor, he's not a therapist, not a license, maybe he is at this point, but back then, and I think still, he was a geeky engineer,
Yeah.
and he had a major aha moment. His company was being sued, and I don't know the details of it. So when people read that, they just think, oh, this author must have,
He has it
gone
all figured out, right?
and has it, but literally he was writing that, which makes that book even more profound.
It's
Because
yeah.
if you could go through that much strife and that much stress and to be able to find that um
Stillness.
sanctuary refuge
Yeah.
of within yourself, then you truly are unbreakable, right? And that's it. I mean, that's also my book. It isn't a matter. I mean, I think that when people do these types of programs or go to retreats, they go to find the answer, and they again ascribe to this, don't ascribe to that, and all of that. But truthfully, it isn't a matter of arriving to a wonderland, because this life is super challenging and difficult. So it is how you walk through it as gracefully and soulfully as possible.
Hmm.
That is truly it.
Yeah. And these retreats and it's as I look around in front of me, all the bookshelves and books and stuff that I have in the closet, right?
It's
Uh,
wonderful. I mean,
it's
that's
wonderful and it's enriching, and it's not one book that has been the silver bullet. And I think that's kind of like one of the things, and even as an author and as a person who's in a personal development, right, it's the book that you need to write right now. And like you said, like you're gonna the fact that it can be multivariable to different subsets of different types of challenges or communities or uh right, that's what's there's these ideas that are just going to be stepping stones for the next layer that people need to peel away. And that's really what this whole thing is. It's just the next layer of the onion, right? The husks of that. And the reminder is that like underneath it all, we're all actually really beautifully wonderful, healthy individuals. It's the stories that like gunked us up. It's the belief of those stories. It's the buy-in to those things, that the traumas, the whatever, right? But are talking about from that soul level, right? That's untouchable. That's unbreakable. That's undestroyable. That's unmuddled. but we believe that, and maybe this is part of where your book leads people, is realizing that that was never damaged in the first place. It's just the husks that we, right, the onion layers that we're peeling away little by
Yeah,
little by little.
and that is so spot on. So much. I mean, literally, the first part of the book, because it's in two parts, the first part of the book is all about the peeling away.
Yeah.
Because whatever our true essence is sitting way, way, way underneath all the schmut we have put on top of it. Again, from the time we detached or disassociated from our
Yeah.
true essence at a very young age. So to be, I in my book, and a few times I've mentioned it, and I'll mention it really quickly. But the most beautiful visual that I have from it, and my background is in film and entertainment, is the Black Stallion. Did you ever see the Black Stallion?
Trying to remember. I'm thinking like 80s and 90s. Like, no,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
Francis Coppola. He I don't know if he's directed it, but he's the executive producer. So just really, really quickly, a boy and a stallion get shipwrecked. They're in the same shipwreck. They ended up getting stranded on an island together, and it's just the two of them. And they spend some time. They're first afraid of one another, but they slowly form a friendship. And the black stallion slowly allows the boy to ride bareback on him. And there's all of these like gorgeous cinematic shots of them riding
mm,
on the beach during sunset. And lo and behold, they are rescued and brought back to society. And they try to separate the boy and the horse, and neither one of them will have it. And they're like, okay, the two of them have to be together. So he studies to be a jockey because that makes sense, right? To be close to.
yeah,
So he gets all this training, the best coaches, all this stuff, and they show a whole thing of that. And then he is at this big race, and out of the gate, he and the horse stumble, and all the other horses take off. And then he rights himself, and then they're and clearly upset, and he starts writing again. And this is where the magic comes in, and I still get goosebumps whenever I talk about it. He starts stripping away everything, like everything, his goggles, his helmet, his whip. And he starts riding the horse the way he did on that beach. And of course they end up winning the race.
yeah.
But that's what it is.
Because it's
That's
always been there.
it.
It's always been
It's
there
been
from the
there.
beginning. Yeah,
It's doing that thing that is calling you forth. And when I talk about the soul, and I tried really hard not to be too woo-woo in my, because it's like you talk about the soul and it gets mixed with, spirit, and they're two different things, which I talk about in the book. But our soul is truly our unique signature in this universe. Like no other organism has the same makeup as you do. And there's something so beautiful about that. And yet we, are raised to, become cookie cutters and be like everybody else. And there's only, these specific professions, and this is good, that is bad, all that stuff. So of course we're like, we end up becoming robotic, and anybody who is, artist, which is, circling back to that, they're the only ones that I truly know who are not detached from their true essence, who are
yeah.
living in, and we don't make it easy for them.
No, no. I know Esther Hicks in the Law of Attraction world calls that your inner guidance system.
Yep.
And and everything, then we create resistance, and our right is to drop the resistance around allowing what is. And I see this all the time. I see this with me. I see this with my clients. One of the things I do, this modality called neuroemotional technique, and it originally came out of chiropractic, and but it evolved into other licensed mental health practitioners and acupuncturists and other stuff. But we're basically looking for the physiological stress pattern and the nervous, and the way the story and that became involved in our nervous system, and our can turn into physical symptoms and stuff like that. So yesterday we had a get together for local practitioners in South Florida, and the thing I worked on was being congruent, in other words, being as neutral as possible with helping the people that are so successful that my client, right, attracting more clients that are incredibly successful, so that can help me, right? The more I can help them, the more that can help me, right? As opposed to like it being this one way thing. And obviously, what does that mean? It's not like, well, I'm using them. It's that my biggest referral source has always been from clients that I've been able to give the most to. And the better I do, the better my clients do, the more I'll do well, right? So, but it was like finding the ways that I have resistance on helping my clients that are really successful become more successful, so that in return it can help me, as opposed to like, like, no, no, I'm just giving. I'm just giving. It's not, because we all have that. Like, even like, even we all need, and I think that's breaking the idea of like, even for therapists, that like we don't have this like, oh no, we're just like this blank slate, but we're not. Like, we all have our stuff still. Um, but I want to, right, but it's me getting in front of the right people.
I also just think that it's a really beautiful way of thinking about it, or approaching it, because then you're always evolving, right?
Yeah.
Every person that you see helps your evolution
Right.
instead of this, yeah, blank canvas, which you're human too.
Correct. Correct. And even if you look at it from in any profession, right, whatever industry, I'll just use mine as it, right. A broke therapist isn't a good therapist.
No, definitely
Right. A
not.
broke anybody is not a good anything. Right. So one of my friends just posted online, like the best way, it's very interesting. We can get into a whole debate about this, but and we don't, not even a debate, but I'm sure we can talk about all the different ways culturally that this may not make sense. But the best way to help those that are financially insecure, right, and financial insecurity, is for you to not be financially insecure yourself,
Mhm.
because then you can create stuff, you can empower, you can give more charity, you can, so it's the rising tide raises up all ships mentality.
Absolutely. And it's also coming back to the whole law of attraction. There's some things I agree with and some things that are a little even too woo-woo for me, but I think that I absolutely believe in energy,
Yeah.
so that type of energy influences, I mean,
Yeah.
energy influences anyway, so why
Correct.
not have positive impact
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, and the way I de woo woo it is that it's all neurology and physiology. So our neurology can only, right, our physiology and our neurology combined together. Like when we're looking at our emotional reality, it can see only that which it's in alignment with, based on our beliefs, assumptions, and expectations, to the point of the amount of work that we've done, and not much more. And we can only attract, right, what we mean by attract, in other words, we can only let in, not let in. Like how many situations, and that was one of the things I was working on, in what ways am I dismissing or diminishing or not allowing opportunities for me to be in front of the people that I can really also serve powerfully, equally powerfully, that also in a way that they might be like, oh, like Jason, here's in return another way in which I could be useful to you in your career and help you get in front of, right, different people, and or people who are more like that, right? And it's whatever belief, assumption, and expectations I carry has to be diminished about that, right? And cleared out.
That's exactly the paradigm shift that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like you doing that, then it's interesting because as I step into this world and I'm considered a subject matter expert, how people view me, and I think that it is really important for those who are in a leadership position to point out that we don't live perfect lives, that we don't, it's not like, we are mistake free and all of that, that it's a evolution and there isn't one uh self transformation thought leader that is out there who I just think is perfection.
Right.
And there is no such thing, right? So, and there are a few who are now speaking about that there's a level of transparency which I so appreciate.
Yeah, and the vulnerability, right? Brene Brown was a good example of that.
Nate
Is a
Brown is a
perfect.
good.
Yeah.
Mel Robbins is another
Sure.
one
Sure.
who, because we come to a place where we have this level of awareness and we're compelled to share it, because we feel that it will benefit those who need it. But there isn't, we're not striving for perfection, and we are humans who are also evolving. Do I believe that there's different levels of consciousness and awareness in this world? Absolutely. And there are so many things I have yet to learn. But that, I'm not done in any way,
Thank goodness for that.
nor is any other
Yeah,
self-transformation, the Anthony Robbins of the world
sure.
need to have their
Well, they're
evolution.
always evolving, and that's the cool thing, and especially seeing people on their journey. Like one of the things I was watching was his name just blinked out on me, but I had his book before his Netflix show, Ramit Sethi, and
Yeah,
seeing it right, and how many years ago I read his books, and now I'm like, and then seeing that he had a Netflix show that came out a few months ago, and I'm like, oh man, like he's been doing this for like 19 or something years, and he like, I mean, just the brilliance in it of like just like the patience with the process, and like him like thinking, no, 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 this is not something that I don't. Obviously, anybody wants to be, tomorrow they want to become the successful person, but him mapping out like, no, this is not going to be a slow. This is a slow burn, so I don't burn out fast long term. And it made me so excited. Like one day it popped up on Netflix that he had a TV show. Like that was like how cool that like X amount of years after his book came out, that he finally was like one of those people that got discovered with just doing the due diligence. And I think it's the commitment to connection over perfection for me, is in right, connecting to yourself, connecting to your people, connecting to community, connecting to all the different ways the tapestry can become uh, more colorful. I guess maybe it is that metaphor of like, the coat of many colors type of thing, right? And it makes a much more beautiful tapestry, but we have to start with that inner work with ourself of not cutting out all of the possible opportunities that are literally right in front of us. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from you, is that when we do that work, when we go into ourselves, when we do the deeper work for ourselves, we're going to start seeing that they've been there all along, but give ourselves opportunity to see more opportunities and to create more opportunities to be truly the healthiest version of ourselves.
absolutely. And I think that the other myth that is reinforced in our society is the quick fix. You talked about the slow burn. I don't know anyone who has turned their lives around, within a day. You can make that decision and move
Right.
toward it,
Sure.
but the process is, it takes a while, and it takes as long as it takes. I mean, when I was grieving my relationship, people around me learned very quickly that they could not tell me to be on with it. Like, oh, well, you've been grieving this long. It's been 6 months. You need
Right.
to, quote unquote, let go, because we don't really let go anyway, right? We just gift it forward to other people. But there's this notion in our society that we just have to get on with it. Like, and it's just, again, like the quick fix, give me three pointers. And while those three pointers are sort of like, really like going to the gym, those, if when you're working out, if you go once a year and you work out once, you're like, oh, this feels good,
Right.
you
Right.
might feel the
But
benefit.
no abs after that one time trip. Don't
Right.
walk out
So,
disappointed that you don't got them. Right.
right. So it's that, it's that same thing. It's like I could give you three quick tips, and it may be handy, but if you haven't done the groundwork of it,
Yeah.
then you're on to the next three, or the 10 big, whatever it is, and as a society, we're built that way. And why? Like, why do you
Right.
need the quick tips in order for you to go and do the more important work, which you're dreading doing? I mean, like, yeah, a lot of crazy making.
Yeah, a lot of crazy making. So as we're wrapping up, for people to find you, one, there's the book. So just drop some places they can read, connect, learn, engage with you. Where are those places?
Anything that is associated with me as a author and self-transformation speaker is in my name. So ShirinEtessam.com and all my socials, whether it's Instagram, on Facebook, I'm Shirin Etessam author. But TikTok, LinkedIn, LinkedIn, it's Shirin Etessam regardless of what I'm doing. So find me. I am really good with DMs. I might not get back fast, but I will get back. I'm trying very, very hard to answer anything that's not not spam directly, but it does take me a
Right,
little while.
no crypto spams are will be answered. So, and the book is called Free to Be, a 6-week guide to reclaiming your soul. And I have one side curveball question for you. So one of my favorite things about the Iranian community is you guys have amazingly poetic curses.
Mm.
And one of them I've heard is may your armpits, right? If you really want to get someone, may your armpits be infested with the sweat of 1,000 camels is one. And another one is may your neighbors never have garbage to take out. Meaning
No.
they're not celebrating, they're not having guests over. People are not celebrating with them. They're not having
Yeah,
feasts,
yeah, yeah.
right? Is there one that comes to your mind? I know it's a hardcore curveball, but is there one that comes to your mind that's just so like hysterically poetic and beautiful and like funny at the same time that is
I don't know if I could think of one that is in that line, but it's such a gorgeous, Persian is such a, Farsi is such
yeah,
a
Farsi, yeah.
um, gorgeous language, and it's very, very precise. So we have, like, for example, the word tekiga. It means someone to lean on. So one word that has that meaning, like we don't have that, or at least I'm not aware of it. So
Mm.
we're very, very
It's
on point.
poetic. Yeah, it's
It's very,
poetically on point.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. There's quite a lot of that, which isn't surprising that the Khayyams and the Rumis are all.
From that background. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there was such beautiful, I mean, the literature and just the wisdom that was coming out from those areas were so fascinating. So thought,
And then
better.
we have other things that are really funny, like how we've acquired certain words. Um, and we could like
Yeah.
get into it, but there's like chosefil, for example,
Popcorn and elephant, right? Popcorn and elephant
elephant
parts.
parts.
Right.
But there's a reason for that because somebody mispronounced something and then it just built on that. So
Yeah, yeah, I remember hearing that one for the first time. It's great. That's great. So yeah, so cool. So all right, to everybody who's been listening, one, thank you again for listening. And if there's anything in this episode that for you loved, just leave us a review, just so we know that you're listening and it helps other people find this. But two, if there's anything specifically that you took away from this, reach out to Shirin directly, reach out to me, let us both know. Because that's why we're doing this. That's why she's taking her time out of her really busy schedule to spend time with me and for us, and why I love doing this so much. So Shirin, thank you again, and really I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation. And hopefully we'll, as the book evolves from the different categories and the different things come on, you'll please come back and tell us more.
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me on your show.